We are back with week 3 of The Artist Way, and even though it's technically been 4 or 5 weeks now since I officially started the book, I'm letting myself jump into week 3 even after I took a little bit of a break or I had an extended couple of weeks of reading week 3, because instead of being black or white and saying I just have to start over or I can't finish this because I wasn't on track with the schedule, I can just move forward into what's next. So here we are, we're at week 3, and I'm going to share my key takeaways from the chapter, which is called Recovering a Sense of Power. And right away, even just the fact that I'm jumping back in even after a little break or after not posting a video last week, there's a great reminder in the book from Julia Cameron, and she says, growth is an erratic forward movement. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and remember that and be very gentle with yourself. So I thought that was an important reminder for anybody, because so often in my own growth journey or in the work that I do with my clients, I feel like there is that forward and backward sense of growth, or it feels like you do take some steps forward, take some steps backward, and it can be frustrating because the brain wants to just go in a linear direction up. But Nate told me this great analogy once, that thinking of growth is not going to be best thought of in a linear direction, but more so like the stock market, where it goes up and to the right, but there are ups and downs throughout. And that's always really resonated with me. So the piece around taking steps forward and backward when you're growing is so important to keep in mind, whether it's with a creative direction or any sort of goal that we have. And Julia added as well in this chapter that as a creative being, we will be more productive when we are coaxed than when we are bullied. And so that was, I think, so important for me. Instead of bullying myself and saying, you missed a week and like you're not good at this and you shouldn't even keep doing this series, I coaxed myself forward and said, okay, let's just read the next chapter. Let's just sit down and plan the next video. And that's all I can do. So with that said, I wanted to move into the 2 key sections of this chapter that stood out to me most. And throughout this book, I've noticed that there's definitely key themes. One of the key themes is the ways that we can become blocked, either as artists, as creatives, or just as people who are living our life. And so the 2 key sections in the book that really stood out to me this week when it came to recovering a sense of power were shame and criticism. So I'm just going to go through the things that I learned most in this chapter, or that really connected with me most when it comes to shame and criticism. When it comes to shame, she says that if we get bogged down by fear before taking action, shame is usually responsible. So if we're about to do something, but then we kind of hold ourselves back, or we feel blocked, or we have resistance to doing something, it's probably because shame is present. And that's really important to note, because when we start seeing areas of our life that we feel blocked, or we feel like we are not taking action, we can then lovingly investigate if there's any internalized shame that we've been holding on to. And I think shame can come from a couple different angles. It can be something that we feel like is coming at us from someone, but it can also be our internalized shame, and then we shame ourselves because of stories or messages that we have picked up over time. So she shares as well in the book that shaming someone is an attempt to prevent the person from doing something that embarrasses us. So my interpretation of this is, if we shame someone, or we try to say, hey, don't do that thing, or, oh, why are you doing that thing? It's because we have a story that that thing is bad or wrong or embarrassing. So if we take that same logic and put it internally, when we are shaming ourselves for doing something, or judging ourselves, or adding stories on top of our actions as like, ugh, I can't believe I'm doing that, that's so bad or wrong, basically we are doing that in an attempt to prevent ourselves from showing up in a way that we would find embarrassing or bad or wrong. And that actually came up for me this week. I sat down this week to do a breathwork video that focused on helping process uncomfortable emotions, and I'll get to more of like why that was coming up later. But I sat down and I realized that I was feeling some shame, and I realized that I was feeling just a sense of like, something I'm doing is bad or wrong this week. And I think I gave this example in another Artist Way video, so this is an interesting pattern that's been coming up throughout going through this book, is I had this story of feeling like I wasn't grateful enough for the things in my life, and then I was really judging that as bad or wrong. So instead of acknowledging, okay, I'm in a season where I don't feel the most grateful, I was really judging that as, well, I should be more grateful. I should be more appreciative of the opportunities that I've created for myself with my job or the relationships that I have around me. And so I really noticed that should story. And whenever we are shoulding ourselves, you should do this, you should do that, there's probably a sense of shame underneath that from a story we've picked up about what is good or bad. So that was an example of my own inner shame that I feel like was coming up throughout this week. And it did feel like it was blocking me from showing up in my life and my business and in my relationship. I was about to say in my marriage, and then I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds so official. But I am married now, so that's true. But it was really blocking me from showing up in different areas of my life the way I wanted to when I was going in a downward spiral because of that shame. So that's really important to note. And Julia Cameron talks about this in chapter 3, that the antidote to shame is to show up with more self-love and self-praise. So important. Instead of kind of getting sucked into like, I'm doing something bad or wrong, showing yourself love and praise. And not to invalidate your shame or not to invalidate the thing that you're going through, but just to remind yourself that you are capable of handling it, you're capable of being with your feelings, you're capable of moving through whatever hard thing is there. If you received criticism from someone, you're capable of moving through that, and then reminding yourself you will be okay. So that was really important for me to hear, because I think this week, especially when I felt like I was stuck in shame, it was helpful to remember that I didn't have to invalidate my feelings, but I could also remind myself that I would be able to move through it and be okay afterwards. I think that this is really the case with both shame coming at us, like from someone else, or shame that we are giving ourselves, is to love ourselves through the feeling of shame. And really there was an emphasis in this chapter as a reminder, and I think this is such an important reminder for me, for anyone listening, that we really do just want to continue practicing being kind to ourselves and doing nice things for ourselves. She gave some examples in the book, like, do you have a really old pillowcase that you just don't really like anymore? Is there a way to get it doesn't have to be the nicest, most luxury one, but like get yourself something nice because you're sleeping on that every single night? Or is there something in your house that you've been just wanting to clean out for a long time? Can you clean that out? Like, just doing nice things for our mental health, our physical health, our environment. And it doesn't have to be, again, the most expensive things. We don't always have to buy something to do something nice for ourselves, but can we focus on just showing up for ourselves in these kind ways? Because then her belief, and what I'm starting to expand my perspective to, is that when we show up kindly for ourselves, then the universe will also show up kindly for us too. So I really liked that, especially as a way to navigate when we're feeling shame and icky internally. It's like, okay, well, that's okay, but can I still show up for myself in these little loving ways bit by bit? The second section that really resonated in this chapter with me was Julia explaining the different ways that we can receive criticism, not only as a person who's trying to tap into more of their creativity and showing up in more of an artistic way, but I feel like this advice just applies to general navigating relationships, navigating career challenges, any sort of criticism we might receive just being human. So she says, as artists, but I'll also add as people, we cannot control all the criticism we will receive. She also says that we can't learn to make our critics more loving or constructive. And I think these two quotes are really important because we have to remember that we can only control how we respond to something, not what someone says or believes or says towards us. And we also can't make someone be nicer or explain something in a way differently than they've already explained it. And sometimes that can be hard for me, especially as someone who put things out into the internet world and it's just left there for anyone to share anything. Most of the time there's such loving and kind messages, but there have been over the years times where I have felt like, okay, yeah, I definitely can't control the criticism coming my way, and I can't make the person saying something critical more loving or constructive. And so it's just a really positive reminder that we can only focus on the way we receive something. And the last reminder she gave that I thought was really important about critics in general is that when someone doesn't want to see something, they will get mad at the person who shows it to them and they end up killing the messenger. And that's kind of a nod back to chapter 1 where she introduces the concept of a shadow artist, someone who feels like they want to do something creative, but then they criticize other people's art because they're not actually doing it on their own. That kind of reminded me of that, where maybe someone who doesn't want to be shown something or something feels triggering or upsetting for them, then they get frustrated at the person who's sharing that idea. So that was also helpful to keep in mind when it came to criticism. Now, the part that really, really helped me, especially this week, was her differentiating the two different types of criticism, or another word for criticism is feedback. Because I definitely take the word criticism as like mostly like negative, but feedback feels just more like a neutral word. And she says, useful criticism or feedback will make you feel a sense of relief and make you feel like, oh, that makes sense, or it gives you food for thought, or it gives you a new puzzle piece for the situation at hand or the art that you're trying to create. It gives you a chance to think differently about something and it almost opens your perspective. Whereas not so useful criticism or feedback feels like it is shaming in tone or ambiguous and isn't really actually telling you anything to do or to change, but it's just like, I don't like this, or this is bad, or it feels like this shameful energy that we just talked about earlier, like the bad or wrong. And I thought this was really important to just understand and differentiate between, because I really liked that nod to the fact that helpful criticism or feedback will expand how you think about something and almost inspire you to reflect more. And a reminder that not so helpful criticism or feedback will just feel icky, and remembering that like it's okay to acknowledge that this wasn't helpful criticism. Because I know as someone who can tend to be a people pleaser or care a lot what other people think about her, and I'm working on this, but I can still care what people's opinions are. And so it's helpful to remember like, well, maybe this person's opinion that they're sharing, if it doesn't feel like useful criticism, maybe that's not someone's feedback that I need to take on. So if we've gotten criticism or feedback, what do we do about it? Well, in this chapter, Julia is sharing that we want to do something nurturing for ourselves. And that's a really big key theme that I took away from this chapter, is really just continuing to nurture and support ourselves, no matter if we've shamed ourselves or criticized ourselves, or if someone else has shamed or criticized us in our work and our art. And remembering that even if we have made truly rotten art, or made a mistake, or did something, that we're not the most proud of, or it wasn't exactly how we wanted it to turn out, that it may be a necessary stepping stone for the next piece of work, or the next project that we're doing, or the next thing that we want to create. I thought that was really important as well, because even if we did make something that sucked, or if we did something that wasn't the best, then that could all just be part of our journey. And then another thing that I really resonated with was to get back on the horse as quickly as possible, because if we receive criticism, we might then go into our head and say, well, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore, or maybe I'm not meant to share what I want to share with the world, or maybe I'm not meant to be in this job because I can't do things correctly, or maybe someone gives us feedback about our relationship and we start questioning, should I be in this relationship anymore? We can really take on a lot of criticism and then go into a downward spiral, but she encourages to get back on the horse. In this case, in the chapter, she recommends doing something else creative as quickly as possible, but we could take that to mean all different things. Jump back into a new project at work, even if the last one didn't go so well. Having another conversation with someone, even if the first one didn't go so well. So really remembering not to stay stuck just because there was feedback or criticism given to us. So cheers to getting back on those horses, even if we have felt knocked down by our own criticism or someone else. All right, well, those were the key takeaways as far as what was physically written in the chapter, but I still feel like it's really therapeutic for me, but also valuable to share some of my key takeaways from doing the Artist Way process over the last week, or really last couple weeks. So when it comes to the two main parts of the Artist Way, the morning pages and the artist date, one thing that was really interesting this week specifically when I was doing morning pages is that I actually felt like there was a creative idea that came from it that was a little creative nudge. And as I was writing, I felt like the idea kept building and building. And then the idea became something that I implemented. So starting tomorrow at the time of posting this, I have a 7-day challenge running inside my You Love and You Learn Patreon community. I actually do monthly 7-day challenges. So the challenge only lasts for a week, but I do them every single month inside the Patreon membership. And it's a way for members to actually take action on something that they're trying to nurture or build in their lives, and to create a new habit and to do it alongside other people. And this one I'm really excited about. And how it all came to be was I was writing in my morning pages journal about a quote that I had came across, which is, "The love that I give becomes the love that I get." And I thought about how much the quote impacted me, and I thought about, okay, I really want to start being intentional about the love that I share, because I know that in some way or form it probably comes back to me. And not that I can only give things to receive them back, but it just creates this cycle of giving and receiving, which I've been trying to continue to open my heart more, to be more giving and more receiving of the love in my life. So it all just felt like a really meaningful quote. And then I was like, why not share this with my Patreon community? And I started researching, when you give to others, what are the benefits for you as well? And it all just came really clearly as this could be something great to share with my Patreon community, and something that I'm really excited to participate in as well. So I thought that was really cool, because it was a clear example of a creative nudge, so to speak, or an idea that kind of came naturally through the morning pages practice, and now it's happening. So as a side note, if you want to jump in on this monthly challenge or any of the other future challenges, or go back into the past challenges that we've done inside Patreon, go ahead and join in the link in the notes underneath the video. I'd love to have you and participate in this alongside you. Now, the second kind of aha moment that came from the morning pages, which is, I feel like Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist Way, has just mentioned this so many times, but she's just said, some days you're gonna sit down and it's all gonna feel like a total waste. You're gonna be like, what's the purpose of this? And I'm just continually reminded about how some days I'll have this idea that comes through, or I'll feel like, oh, that helps me feel more light or clear. And other days I'm like, I'm literally just writing nonsense. This doesn't mean anything. And she continues to emphasize that is still part of the process. So even though that's been happening plenty still, I'm very proud of myself just for continuing the daily practice of sitting down to write the 3 pages and just doing my best. So that was kind of a cool reminder again, that no matter how far you are into a habit, there's still probably going to be days where you're like, what's the point of even doing this? And that's just a totally human response. The next thing that is part of doing the Artist Way is taking yourself on the weekly artist date, which is just a chance to try something new, get yourself out of your routine, and give your inner artist a chance to get new inputs. And this week I took myself to a hip hop dance class. I kind of just looked it up and decided to sign up for a drop-in class the same day. And it ended up being only 6 minutes away from my house, which was kind of cool. And it was a choreography dance class. So we learned a maybe like 45-second to 60-second section of Missy Elliott's Work It. I'm pretty sure that was the song. Yes, that was the song. It was so fun because that's kind of a throwback to music I used to listen to when I was in middle school, I would say, or high school. It was just nostalgic, and so it felt like a fun dance class to sign up for. And even going into the class, I knew myself and I knew, try not to overthink this, because I am not the best dancer, or at least it's not something I've put a lot of time into practicing as far as my dancing skills. And so I knew that learning choreography would probably feel a little uncomfortable. And I gave myself the reminder, try not to overthink it or try not to get in your head and judge yourself, which was harder than I thought it would be. But I loved trying something new, and there were two really cool reminders that I got at the end of the class, because I stayed back and I was talking a little bit with another new student that night, and I was talking with the dance teacher as well as the person who helped check us in for the class, who also participated. And there were two good reminders that came out of that, because I told them, I tend to overthink sometimes. And the dance instructor said, I haven't been dancing my whole life. And so when I started, when I was kind of a young adult, I got in my own head too and said, everyone else is so much farther along than me. And someone gave her this advice that said, whenever you feel intimidated by someone, maybe in the dance class around you, switch out the word intimidated with inspired. And that's such a good point. If I really wanted to get good at dancing, I could put in more energy towards it, and I could use other people's skills as inspiration to remind myself that I could also do that too. I would say the same is true with my ceramics journey, seeing people throw these big pots or vases, remembering that that can be inspiration for me to continue learning and growing in that area. So that was really great. And then the woman who helps work at the company and was at the class as well said, when I get in my head, I have to remember that I am here to express myself. I'm not here to impress other people. And that was just a mic drop moment. Like both of those things, switching out intimidation for inspiration, and then switching out I'm here to impress versus I'm here to express, like they both just are catchy phrases, but they really stuck with me. And so I'm sharing them in the hopes that for anyone who's trying something new, you can also keep that in mind. And I'm keeping those things in mind as well as I sit here and record this video, which part of me is like, I need to impress the person watching this, but really this is a way that I'm here to express myself and share my journey through the artist way, and to just put it out there and see what comes from it. So that was my recap of my artist date this week. Definitely a fun new experience, and I'm excited for the other artist dates to see what happened. Now, a couple of just like general thoughts and lessons and reflections from this week's chapter. The section on criticism was actually particularly relevant to me this week, because there was some not so useful criticism that was left on a video that I did. And at first I didn't understand like what the criticism was, because it was ambiguous and not specific. And then later there were additional comments that gave a little bit more clarity, but essentially the feedback, after pausing to reflect on it, it seemed to be more along the lines of, I disagree with your opinion or this opinion, so I don't like this post, versus something that could give me food for thought of how I could have communicated something better or shared something better. And ultimately, this would mean that in order for me to implement the criticism or the feedback, I would have to change my beliefs or my opinion about something. So after reflecting on it, it didn't feel helpful, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt in the moment or it didn't throw me off a little bit. And so it took a bit, but the words in this chapter really helped me move through that moment and see the situation differently. So it was very timely, and I'm grateful for that section, especially this week. And then the last thing I'm just going to say in this video is a lesson or a reflection that I have no idea if it had nothing to do with the artist way or it had everything to do with the artist way. But something that came up for me this week was a reminder to not try to avoid uncomfortable emotions and not bottle things up, and to not try and face everything internally, but to also let people in and to be in relationship with safe people in your life. And essentially this week, the first half of the week, I was really up in my head and just kind of like feeling things, but like overthinking things. And I was just having a hard couple of days. And it wasn't until I did a breathwork video called Meeting Uncomfortable Emotions, and it's in the Awaken Breathwork membership, and they do a 7-day free trial, so I'll put the link to that down below in case you want to try this specific video. But this specific video I've really loved and I've done a few times before, and it basically reminds you to sit with whatever emotions you're experiencing and not to push them away and not to judge them and not to judge yourself for having uncomfortable emotions and not to expect yourself to be good vibes all the time. And this was really important for me this week, specifically when I was going through a little bit of a micro funk, so to speak. And when I sat down at the beginning of that video and the guide said, "What are you feeling right now?" The feelings that came up were shame, which I explained earlier of why I was feeling that way. Then I felt a sense of sadness. I don't necessarily know why. Maybe because I was just having all of the shame around the gratitude stuff. Maybe because a sadness of not feeling exactly the clear roadmap of where I hope to be feeling for things in my business right now, even though I'm putting out feelers to the universe and exploring that. And then I felt a sense of loneliness because I wasn't sharing any of this with my safe, trusted people, and I felt like I had to hold it in, not because of anything they've said or done, but just my own stories of not wanting to bring this stuff to other people, or feeling like, oh, I'll just talk about it later and I'll just try to figure it out first. And so all of those things were sitting with me earlier this week. And once I did the video and actually had a good cry and just let the emotion be felt, I was able to shift perspectives a bit. But it wasn't until I actually sat with those feelings and acknowledged what they were, and then did open up to safe and trusted people like Nate and to a couple of my best friends. There was a release and a moving through versus trying to skirt around. And so again, I have no idea if this is related to my journey in the artist way at all. It could be totally irrelevant, but because it happened this week, I really wanted to share that aha moment. And so I think that the second half of this week was so much more enjoyable for me because I was able to kind of face and sit with some of these feelings that were coming up. And so it just felt kind of related to the sense of shame that I talked about in this week's chapter. But I wanted to add it because I just feel like the inner coach in me always loves to share not only some of my own experiences to help you feel less alone, but to ways to kind of coach yourself through situations. And so the takeaway here is like to one, find tools that can help you sit with uncomfortable emotions, whether it's breath work or doing a guided meditation, or even just like sitting and placing a hand on your chest and taking deep breaths, whatever it is, journaling, going inward sometimes, and just acknowledging what you're feeling and not judging it and not rushing to fix it. And then also finding safe and trusted people to like let in when you're feeling certain ways, not necessarily to make them responsible for fixing anything for you, but just to let people know, like, I'm having a hard time this week, and letting them be there to hear you. So that is my week 3 recap. And I'd love to know what part stood out most to you. Feel free to leave a comment, or if you have questions, anything I can clarify about my interpretation of this week's chapter in The Artist Way. And thank you so much for being here.